You think you know me?
I want you to imagine this scenario. A game you work so hard on launches, and it is a colossal failure. So many people mock the game and say that the characters that you tried to create were soulless and scary in certain aspects, making them almost feel like animatronics, and that you shouldn't be working on kids' games. What would you do in that moment? For some devs, you drop the gloves, you move on, you throw the towel, you go home. But for Scott Cawthon, he threw that critique right back at them. It is the month of Halloween. It is the perfect time to talk about horror stuff. And I have so much horror that I want to talk about. But this was always on my mind. With Five Nights at Freddy's, the movie finally coming out after being in production hell for Lord knows how long, we are finally getting the movie that we wanted so badly to see. And it really makes you reflect on how big the franchise has grown since 2014. I was like 9 years old when this game came out. This game traumatized me as a child, and I still love it. But despite all of its sequels improving and falling off on certain aspects, I always hold the first game to a high pedestal. In my opinion, Fnaf 1 just has this certain spark that the other games haven't seen. Sure, in Fnaf 2 you had the toy animatronics, Fnaf 3 had Springtrap, and 4 you had the nightmares, but Fnaf 1 really benefited from its simplicity. Even though there wasn't a new gimmick in this game and there was a lack of complex lore, it benefited from you just being a simple night guard working a night shift that accidentally uncovers these animatronics. And generally, that's what I'll be talking about in this video. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 as a whole. Its small origins, its launch and gameplay, and its legacy. Before we can even touch the topic of Five Nights at Freddy's, we have to go back to the year of 2013, when Scott released the game Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., the exact same game that would spark Five Nights at Freddy's. If you were to do a quick background check on Scott Cawthon, you'd find out that he wasn't always a horror game developer. In fact, he started out his gaming dev career pretty normal, not even actually doing anything horror related. You can see some of this stuff from his old YouTube channel, but to brief it up, here's some of the things you can find on there. An animated series as well as footage for a game based on the novel Pilgrim's Progress, a Christian novel about a Christian named Christian on his way from sin to salvation. Another project on his channel was called Desolate Hope. You can still play it on Steam. It's a sci-fi game about a coffee machine that bands together with other robots. And even though it's not a horror game, I can't lie, some of these models are scary as hell. And then there were also some smaller projects and some mobile games. Back on the topic of Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., gameplay wise there was nothing wrong with Chipper and Sons Lumber Co. It was just a beaver tycoon about a beaver selling wood. And it was a pretty simple concept on paper. And it translated pretty well in its gameplay. Where people had issues, however, was in the character design. By 2013, Chipper and Sons was classified in the uncanny valley type of games. It just felt off sometimes to play these characters. A lot of these characters only had one emotion, and that was smiling. Their animations kind of stiff in movement as they moved along. And that's where the comparison of Chuck E. Cheese or other animatronics came from. Like, you know what I mean. You've probably been to Chuck E. Cheese or returned to Chuck E. Cheese when you were older, and you just kind of think that those animatronics are kind of off. You know what I mean? And so people left a lot of negative reviews on Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., pointing out the uncanny valley feelings that the game gave to the player. This sent Scott to a deep depression as he worked hard on Chipper and Sons Lumber Co., and he questioned on whether or not he should continue to make video games. But in an interview with Geeks Under Grace, Scott says this: The experience of the negative reviews may have sent him into a deep depression, but it snapped him and also gave him motivation. If they think Chipper and Sons Lumber Co. was terrifying, they've seen nothing of what the man can do. So, using his critique on the game as well as recalling some of his moments being at older restaurants with animatronics, he decided to go full force on the animatronic idea, releasing Five Nights at Freddy's. At the time, there was no lore built upon this moment, so the story was relatively simple. You are a night guard that reads on his newspaper that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is looking for a security guard to cover a night shift. You take the job, you get settled into your new office, and then that's when things start to get weird. As you're going through your first night, you're introduced to a guy on the phone, and while he is reading and basically guiding you through the instructions and regulations of the place, he mentions that the animatronics are able to move, and that they don't move anymore due to an incident.
So just be aware, the characters do tend to wander a bit. They're left in some kind of free roaming mode at night. They used to be allowed to walk around during the day too, but then there was the bite of 87. Yeah. It's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe, you know?
He also begins to mention something of the animatronics having a certain protocol when seeing humans at night, mistaking them for metallic endoskeletons, and in their coding, force you back into a suit. Not exactly the funnest thing. And usually, in perfect timing after this phone call, one of them is usually missing. And this begins your long week working here. Gameplay wise, this game is pretty simple. You click around as your character doesn't move from his office. You just move around and click things. You click on the camera to change them. You click on the lights to check if there's anyone there, and you click on the doors to close them. A simple recipe to a point-and-click survival horror. But what really shines is the ambience and art style of the game, an exact reflection of the criticism he received from Chipper and Sons Lumber Co. Every negative thing about the characters feeling stiff and scary looking is embraced in loving arms in this game, and the critique on them being animatronics is reused here perfectly, as now you're in an old animatronic pizzeria place. And yet somehow these soulless animatronics feel alive. Honestly, I just assume it's because since you're stuck in the office, the use of imagination and the unknown really benefits. But as they move, you can hear certain things and certain things happen, and it just makes you like scared of these things. For example, when Bonnie and Chica are close, you begin to hear muffled breathing. And it's not what you would ever expect any animatronic to be making. Same thing as when they're approaching, you can hear their footsteps even if you can't see them because of the darkness, you just know what's coming. The use of sound cues as well is also greatly used, as already demonstrated. Another thing is that in the distance you can hear these animatronics also begin to hum or play music. This game will always make sure you never feel alone. There's always someone or something out there that's keeping you company. And while you're in this state of some paranoia, always checking the cameras, always closing the doors, the game starts to play tricks with you and change things on the camera. On one of the cams, there's a clear outline of the rules of safety at the restaurant, but if you keep changing in and out of the camera so often, you'll start to notice that this changes to some things that are completely different. In this case, it's police reports, with each individual report giving us something new to learn about. That many years ago, children were lured into the back room of a Freddy Fazbear's and killed. And now the place has issues with these robots bleeding and spitting out mucus, almost like they're reanimated corpses. These small lore drops help build some fear as you're playing the game. Slowly learning about what these things are doesn't make your situation any more comforting or better. In conclusion to this segment, Five Nights at Freddy's 1, although simple in its gameplay, set it out to do exactly what it wanted to do, using the critique from the past to form a horrifying experience, always keeping the player on their toes as the game messes with them. And in return, made Scott Cawthon a huge success, marking the start of a long franchise.